This is episode number 11.
Who's that?
My name's Adam.
Just FYI, Adam, we've started. We have started. I don't know if you could tell the shift of tone that happened.
Is this how it works?
Yeah, this is how it works.
Okay.
We just begin.
All right.
If you can't tell, we have a special guest. First one.
I heard a different voice.
Okay, so to get to know you, previously, Lockie and I have chosen 3 individual words that describe our character or our nature or who we are or things that we're thinking about who we are at the moment. If you had to give us 3 words that described you.
I would prefer, if it's okay, for you to give me each 3 words that you would say describe me. You both journeyed with me for a long time. So why don't you describe me, and maybe those 3 words will include why you invited me.
Interesting. Should we go 1 for 1, Lockie, like we have done previously?
Yeah, I think 1 for 1's good.
Cool. The first word I would use is upside down, because you do things differently. I guess for as long as I've known you, the moment that I feel like I got it down pat, you do something upside down again. And I enjoy that. And you could probably tell by the first 5 minutes of the episode.
I would follow with people, for lack of a better word. And the reason I choose people is because I guess it kind of goes in a direction of you not being hyper-focused on you, but how you operate with people around you and how you help them and guide them and lead them.
My second word would be mischief. It's just you're always up to something cheeky, causing a bit of mischief.
Before that came out of your mouth, my next word was chaos.
In tandem with.
I think I'm going to stick with it. Mischief and chaos. You love a curveball. Well, we've done an episode on going off script, and maybe that's the same kind of word for chaos, but you don't like to follow the script or do things how it's supposed to be done. You like to take a different approach. I haven't been in a scenario where it's not fun or enjoyable or exciting. Both of our second words almost mean the same thing. But
Well, that sort of sums the 3 words. So
we brought you to this location because we believe that you have a story to share that ties in incredibly well to some things that we have spoken about very recently. We have both understood and heard the story that you've shared about Maple, and we wanted to dedicate an episode to that story. And as much as Jonah and I could try and share that story, I don't think it would do it anywhere near justice than from yourself. So
I guess I'll share a story. Some time ago, I had a bit of a trip to Canada for a number of different reasons, and was headed to a particular campsite for a leadership conference. And hadn't been to Canada for a long time, but have always loved maple syrup. Yeah, so I went on this trip to Canada, and particularly over in the sort of Toronto-y sort of area, up to a campsite to have a bit of a conference. And while I was there, sort of just having a bit of a wander around the campsite, sort of just post-winter, and just noticed some blue pipes amongst the trees, and it caught my attention as I was walking from one place to another, and went down into the myriad of little blue pipes and tubes, and saw that became very obvious to me that there was maple syrup being collected. And I don't know why, but in that little experience, something just started to itch away at my curiosity about the formation process. And I just got a bit of a hint that maybe there was something important to learn about reflection and what reflection might do in the life of a person. But it had something to do with this whole process of extracting maple syrup. So I found the guy who was responsible for the system, and I had a super big conversation with him. It was one of the funniest, most awkward conversations because I was like so deeply focused on understanding what the process was of collecting maple syrup from a tree. But like underneath, I'm like, this is all about formation. This is all about reflection. And for him, it was all about maple syrup and collecting it from a tree, which for him is a regular everyday sort of thing. So he was just so puzzled by my questions and the detail of my questions.
He would have been polite about it though.
He was super polite.
Being Canadian.
Being Canadian. But yeah, so that's sort of how it all began. And so I mean, it's probably relevant to give you all of my wisdom and knowledge about how maple syrup comes to be. Given that we're sitting around a fire in Australia, and I'm assuming the three of us have never made maple syrup in our lives.
No, I've had maple syrup.
Yeah.
But never made it.
Never made it, yeah. It's quite a process. And I think probably the first thing to note is that maple syrup comes from trees, particularly a tree called...
I want to say maple tree, but it feels like a setup.
It feels like a setup, but it's true, right?
And I imagine it just oozes out of the tree.
Well, no, it just doesn't, right? It doesn't. So what you do is at a particular time of year, you go to a tree or multiple trees if you have them, and you drill a hole into the tree and you bang in this little thing called a spile, which is, I guess, like a little funnel. And then you either put a tube off that to collect it somewhere into a bucket. And over time, what will happen is like the sap of the maple tree will just start coming out, and you collect it in a bucket. And then once you've collected enough, you start a fire and you start to cook it, but just really slowly. And over time, it just gets a little bit more sticky and a little bit more gooey, and you add a little bit more sap in, and then it gets a little bit more sticky. And just over time, just nice and slowly, it just starts to turn into this beautiful liquid gold. That's how maple syrup is made. And I'm sure that there's big manufacturing plants that make it all big and in some completely industrial sort of way, but it's the same sort of deal. And I think probably the biggest wonderings for me would come to the fact that being a person that facilitates experiences and hopes for transformation and hopes for growth in participants of those experiences, this just made sense to me. That particularly in the role of a facilitator or guide of what it means to extract something, but let it cook. What does it mean to extract something out of somebody and then keep thinking about it and keep being intentional about it, keep asking questions until that moment of transformation that you guys have talked about a whole bunch starts to emerge into reality. And then even keeping going and keep asking good questions until such point as it just turns into liquid gold, i.e. that it turns into this a clear awareness that someone has made a discovery in their life that's important enough that it makes a difference. So that's sort of how it all connects together for me.
My semi-follow-up question is, since that experience, like you obviously got a lot of information there, which you developed into a story. Since having that information and having a bit of a story built, how have you utilized that in the last set amount of time? Where has it come up and what has that kind of done for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a lot. It's just been for me. Brian was the sugar maker's name. Having that conversation with Brian was just stunning, and that gave me so much life and so much energy around this as a concept, and every little nuance around, which I guess we'll talk about, which will bring out why it's so exciting for me. Those little nuances for me were just like they were just great, and now as I go through my life, I do think about some of those core elements when I'm having conversations with people. And yeah, does that answer your question, all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. All right. Well, why don't you just jump into the analogy with me now? Now you guys are well, I guess apprentice sugar makers. You're facilitators of experiences.
Sugar makers. Yeah,
Sugar
yeah,
makers.
we're with you.
Yeah. So if you guys are facilitators or guides, and you're taking people into adventurous journeys, and you're hoping for some level of transformation, which I get out of your podcast and out of journeying with you as a people, that's got some pretty strong intent for you. Jump into some of these pieces. And when it interests you, stop me and tell me why. Before I kick into some of the little cute elements, if I was to ask you guys straight away, if you can identify in your heads what the sap is, what the tree is, who the sugar maker is, what would you say?
For me, the maple is just like knowledge and experience and like understanding of pieces of information from along the way. And the tapping is not coming from trees, but from people that you meet throughout your journey. And then that's obviously funneling down. It's coming from like all the tubes into you, and then you're the jar basically. And then you get to provide that. And I think that's what the maple story is, realistically. I think it's something you picked up.
That's a very good take.
That's a very different answer to mine.
And mine.
And I love it.
Sick. But
Thank you, Lockie.
When it comes to who the sugar maker is, like would that make that you? Or are you the jar of maple?
And then who is the sugar maker?
It's great. These are all great
That's cool.
questions. Yeah.
Well, that's my take.
Here's my take. I think mine's hard because the characters and the roles and the things keep moving. So I would say the tree is the person, but also the experience that they're having. It's kind of all weirdly meshed in together. And the tube with the unrefined maple is them journeying along the experience. And the maple is all the things that are happening to them, but they don't know what it is yet. It's all just the unrefined chaos that is happening around them in the experience. And it pulls into what I'm imagining is like some sort of huge pot of some kind that is over a fire. And that is, I would say in my context, this like reflection process where it's a conversation and it's asking questions. And me in my context, if the person was another tree, I am both the sugar maker and I'm not the sugar maker because I can only distill or ask questions for so long. It's up to the person to continue thinking and refining and tending to this gooey sap, because if I'm only with them for a short experience, I'm not going to get to the end of the refining process, but they will, because it's within them. And so it's hard because a participant to an adventure and experience is both tree, the tube, the sap, the cauldron, the sugar maker, the fire. You know, it's up to them to keep it, you know. So it just gets warped, but it makes sense in my head. Like I could probably throughout a timeline or throughout the life cycle of experience, I would see roles shifting and changing and elements of the analogy shifting and changing, but a good facilitator understands where they are in the process and their job and when not to. That's my take.
Wow. Thank you both. Thank you. That's so vastly different to my take.
That's so good. It's a whole nother story, really.
But I think that's what makes it great. So let's just drop a visual of that description that I said before. Just imagine a forest. Whether you know what a maple tree looks like or not is pretty irrelevant. Just imagine a forest with a whole bunch of trees. And on each of those trees, there's probably two little sort of spires, like these little funnily like nails attached to each of the trees. And coming out of the bottom of each of those spirals is a tiny little tube, and that tube is connected to the other spile that's on the tree, and that little tube is then connected to another tree that's 5-10 meters away from it. And all the way down through the forest, every maple tree that comes across this path of tubes has a couple of spirals attached into it. And all of those tubes come together down at the bottom of a little hill into quite a large vat. There's just this one little collection place for all of the sap. That just sort of helps in my head that you do actually think of a forest and you do think about all this connected network of tubes, and it all comes together in this one place. And that's that collection point is sort of where you would then go away to your fire and start to, I guess, cook. Yeah. So there's a couple of elements that become important. Whatever the tree is, whoever the tree is, whoever the sugar maker is, whatever the spile is, whatever the pipes and tubes are, you take that to whatever you're thinking it might be. Let me talk a little bit about timing. So the season is really, really important. In Canada, things get really cold and they get a bit warm too. And the sap is primarily, as far as I understand it, is just water in the tree. But it's water with all of the nutrients and the goodness of the tree inside it. And in wintertime, that freezes because it does get really, really cold. So just after winter and just before spring, that's the time to be collecting sap, to tap trees and grab the sap out of the tree. It's a very specific time. It's because the water in the tree that's frozen is unfreezing during the day, and some amazing natural things that happen in trees that science could probably tell us about mean that the water starts to get pushed under pressure around the tree. And so if you drill a hole in the tree, that water is going to come out of the hole. And so if you start to collect water from out of that hole, then that's where all the sap's going to come out. It'll go to the leaves and it'll go to the buds, it'll go to the extremities, but it'll also go out any hole that's in the tree. But it's the season that's important. You have to do it in that time frame because otherwise the pressure of the sap coming out just isn't there in other times of the year. And so it's the particular time of life when things are a little bit dormant, a little bit cold, a little bit frozen, but then through an experience of a nice warm day, something happens and a bit of pressure builds and this sap just comes out. But it also has to be done before the tree buds. So Brian told me that once the tree hits spring and starts budding, all of the energy and all of the goodness of all that sap starts to head to all those parts of the growth areas of the tree. And so any sap that you get out at that point just isn't as full of nutrients and isn't as good. So it's really specific timing. It's just after winter, just before spring, before the tree buds, when the tree is sort of dormant in some places and then coming to life, and dormant, coming to life. It's undergoing this change. And there's the moment. There's the moment. Not only that, but once you get the sap out of the tree, once you tap the tree and the sap's coming out, this I love, you can't keep it for very long. Like you have to distill it pretty quickly. Because if you leave it for, say, a week or so, all of the flavour of the maple that you'll end up with at the end is gone. So once you collect the sap, you've got to get into the distilling process straight away. What's that bringing up for you? In your context, in your world, what does all that mean?
I like the idea of timing. Trying to decipher the right time. And that there's this balance between waiting for the right time. And then there's this sense of urgency when it is the right time. And the urgency isn't quick, but it's urgent that you get to it. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Okay, I've literally just come straight off the back of like 3 days of just intense program with kids and young adults and going through experiences. And the word after that section that comes to my head is just opportunity. And so for me, I've spoken to the kids that we have at the moment on camp about there's going to be all these opportunities that arise. And not only do you need to decide what you do with them, but you need to be aware of them and like when they're coming and you're looking for them. I don't know if we've discussed it, but I have another reel saved. There's a common puzzle where they put up a picture of all these black cars. It's just like a top-down view of black cars. And there's probably 40 of them or so. And then there's a couple red ones just scattered. And the image just says, how many red cars do you see? And then you go to the next clip and it's like, how many black cars did you count? You got no idea because you were too focused on the red. You weren't looking at the black. The black was way more obvious, but that helps me visualize what opportunity looks like. If you are looking at one thing, you'll just completely miss something else. I think when you talk about the season and the timing, it's all the same stuff. And in my head, if I was to visualize that in real life, it's when we take people out on an experience and we're guiding them, that's us kind of like leading into the season. And then, yeah, they either like do it at that time or you have to wait until the next season. Or something I was thinking about as you were talking through that is, I wonder what, for someone who is a sugar maker, is that what the title is? Someone who's a sugar maker, what does their off season look like and what do they do? Because I think there's another component in that leads into the timing and the preparing and the like what you're doing all in between. And if we were talking about us taking someone out on an activity or a session or guiding them on an experience, and that's the season, and then when they make the right decision or the wrong decision, they have to live with that until their next adventure or next opportunity or next season, what does that look like? So I feel like I just got flooded with thoughts, which is good. This is what I want.
Here's a few more little interesting things. We noted about how many times you drill a hole into a tree.
Mm-hmm.
About 2. So you don't over drill. Like if you're drilling 3, 4, 5 holes into a tree, if you're trying to extract a whole bunch of sap out of one tree, it doesn't cope well with that. So around about 2 is good. You think about where to put the hole in the tree. It's obviously got to be at a place above where the snow line is so that you can actually access it. But you avoid parts of the tree that are damaged or wounded. I find that really interesting. You don't drill a hole into something where a wound is because it's not going to produce good sap. It's not going to produce a good steady flow. It's going to be impeded by some sort of by the wound or the damage that's there. So you leave those bits alone. And sometimes where you've drilled a hole and you've popped a spile in, it dries up. But that's okay because all you do is if it dries up and it's not working well, it's not producing much sap, you can actually just re-drill the hole, even in the same place, and sap will start to flow out of it again. I find that really interesting about the tree. You don't overburden the tree with too many tap points. You avoid places where there's wound because it's not going to be very effective for a good flow, and probably may damage the tree a little bit further. And Jonah wants to say a word.
I was just thinking, the thought that came to my head when you were speaking about trees that have wounds in it and that you use the word avoid drilling holes. The thing I was thinking about was, is it avoiding or do you treat that part of the tree differently?
Yeah, you're caring for it by not drilling a hole in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're actually caring.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'm not going to touch that.
No, it's not avoiding. It's like, I can't go near it. It's like, no, I actually care for it by doing something different with it.
Yeah, it's making good choices around where to drill a hole.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I wondered with Brian, like when can you start getting syrup out of a tree? And he said, oh, you got to wait till the tree's about 40. And I'm like, oh, that just blows all of that out of the water for me. All the things that I was thinking about, what does it mean to sort of, ask really great questions to people of all ages and what sort of transformation might come. I've got to wait till someone's, a good solid adult before we can start asking good questions. And then as I was sitting in that disappointment, Brian goes, oh, but, like trees live for like hundreds of years. You just got to wait till it's sort of, about 40, but that's young. 40's young for a maple tree. And I was like, righto.
Back on. It's back on.
It's back together. Everything that I love about this opportunity right here is back together. You, in the life cycle of a maple tree, 40 years is young. So you can start drilling holes and getting sap out of a tree and making maple syrup when it's young. And you can keep doing that year on year on year for the whole life.
I was going to say, did Brian say an age that it stops?
No, he did not.
Stunning.
He did not. I'll just let you take that for what it is. No comment needed.
Appreciate it. What other nuggets of gold do you have for us in this story?
Oh, yeah. The forest matters. Like Brian said, like if in a whole bunch of like the industrial places where they make maple syrup en masse, it's just maple tree, like in this uniform fashion, I guess, because it's industrial. He said you're going to get better results from a diverse forest. It's just maple trees, and there's other trees, and there's the soil needs to be really, really good quality, and that the soil quality comes out of having a diversity of trees in a space, diversity of plants. And when you've got good soil quality, so when a tree is rooted in some places that have got good nutrients, that changes the profile of the nutrients in the tree, which changes the outcome of the maple syrup when you get there. So the environment matters. I also like that. I'll leave this to your own thinking too. I love the idea of a tree attaching to another tree, attaching to another tree, attaching to another tree. Love that sense of togetherness that sort of sits there. It's not just one tree that's contributing to what the end result is. It's a whole bunch.
Sharing.
Yeah. This is something that I was thinking today. As a maple tree, if no one comes up and drills a hole into it, then the sap just stays inside and it never becomes maple syrup. It'll do its job. The tree will grow. But the goodness that is maple syrup will never come out if no one ever drills a hole into a tree and taps a spile in and collects some sap.
Question.
Yeah.
Is there an obvious way in this format to like walk up to a maple tree and know the like quality of said tree or sap externally? Or is it like it's
a question you'll have to ask Brian. I don't know. I don't know. I would assume there is. That actually, Lockie, is a fair segue into the sugar maker. Sugar makers are a unique breed of people. They really froth on what it means to make maple syrup. All of them have a unique process. All of them have different theories and ideas on how to make maple well. But that doesn't really matter because they're all making maple syrup and they're all having a great time doing it. And they love to have a chat with each other and go, how do you do it? What are you doing? Where are you getting your maple from? There's all of this, there's a lot of action that goes on in the sugar making world, a lot of camaraderie around making the best, most syrupy gold in the world. And so Brian told me a little bit about his process, and his belief is that an open fire like we're standing around at the moment, really simple with a low, thin pan or tray that the sap gets put into, but a really soft and low fire and a gentle process that is really meticulously cared for is the best way to make maple syrup. There's people out there with like bigger machines and cleaner processes and evaporators, and there's different scientific methods of making maple syrup, but he just prefers to sit around a little fire and carefully pour in little bits of sap time after time. He says the wood matters, the smoke matters, everything matters in the process. Because this is probably the thing that stunned me the most in this whole gamut of maple syrup making, is that when you collect the sap, you're actually collecting quite a fair bit of sap out of the trees. The more trees that you collect sap out of, the more you collect. But one little jar of maple syrup, so like in Australia, it's like 250 mils is like a regular jar of maple syrup. It takes 40 litres of sap from a maple tree to make 1 litre of maple syrup. 40 litres distills down to 1. So as much as you're grabbing a whole bunch of sap out of a tree, there is this long and slow and intentional process where, now in my mind, I don't want to break your analogies, but in my mind, there is the amount of stuff that comes out of the trees needs refining. Because in and of itself, it's just like a weird tasting water. But it takes an intentionality around someone sitting around a fire, stoking the fire, caring for the fire, putting the right amount of liquid in, monitoring how it's bubbling away, being really careful and intentional with it so that it becomes what it becomes.
Why did that grab your attention so much?
I don't know how many times I've stood on the edge of an abseil cliff and said phrases like, trust me, or described how safe something is and encouraged a participant to, head out on that particular adventure. In any different context, a participant that may be worried or frightened or scared or maybe even not, you may be just in a liminal space and you're having conversations about how your day is or whatever. Like, I feel like that for me is almost like extracting sap out of the tree. And so there's a lot to extract. So you just keep extracting. And I really firmly believe that for particularly facilitators and guides of experiences, that curiosity matters, but purposeful and intentional curiosity. Curiosity that's like seasoned with wonder and seasoned with discovery, so that as you listen to all of the things that your participants might be saying and reflecting back, you start to wonder, oh, that's interesting. I might ask another question about that. Oh, I feel that's a worthy little line of questioning to go down. So you keep asking questions about that. You turn the conversation into that particular way. You might refer back to other moments or adventures that you've been on together and add that into the conversation. And it's all of those little pieces that you start to pull together. But it's all curious questioning. It's not telling, it's just asking. And there's this invitation into thinking and reflecting. And there's this invitation into, what does that mean for you? How might this transform the way that you think or the way that you feel or the way that you act? And inevitably it bubbles down. And if you've got enough time, it just bubbles down and it bubbles down and bubbles down. And it will turn into something gold if that process remains intentional. If the sugar maker is there, looking after that sap, piece by piece, being purposeful with it, some gold will happen. I think that's why that was maybe the most important piece for me. The other pieces are thoroughly interesting, and you could go down those rabbit holes forever. But the fact that so much sap comes out of a tree and so little turns into gold. But I guess it's all of it turning into gold, but it's over process and time, intentionality. That's why.
And that it would never turn into that without the stewardship and the care of the sugar maker.
Correct.
It's just 40 litres of
40
unrefined,
litres of sap. Yeah.
Potentially not even tapped from a tree.
Yeah. And even if it is tapped from a tree, even if if we use part of my definition of the analogy, you might just go and ask a whole bunch of great questions. And all of this information pours out from your participant and you don't follow it up with care. You don't be curious about the next little element. You don't wonder and try and discover something. Inevitably, it'll just lose its value.
It's that leaving the sap for too long.
It's the leaving the sap for too long, yeah. And I think, like in the context that you guys exist in, experiences, both individually and together, are just like this ripe playground for a sugar maker or for a guide. Ripe playground for asking questions and wondering, and you've stood in the places and you've guided in the places where you have hundreds and thousands of times, but your participants are there for the first time. And it's something that's new and exciting and wonder-filled and frightening and all at the same time. And because you're there and you're comfortable and you know the process, you've got just this opportunity to dig in.
I think when we get to this point of this little theory, I'm going to call it, things fly through my head of like how much waste is there, where does the waste go, what happens with it, and how many times has like a sugar maker tapped like 20 liters of maple but not 40 and then just had to like get rid of it. And there's probably, in the context of our job and our industry, there's probably so many people that don't know what this process is, but they are like gathering all of this maple, but once it gets to distilling, they don't know what's next and they don't distill, and so then it all just like goes to waste or gets lost.
And look, I need to be fair to the analogy. I think that's one place where it breaks. Working with people, regardless of how far you go into the distill, it's always worth asking a question, because we don't know where that's going to go. We don't know how potent that one question or those two questions are in the life of a person. You don't know. I guess it's more about the opportunities that exist there. I don't think any question asking is ever to waste. There's a philosopher named John Dewey, lived about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and he said that we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on an experience. So any time where there's an experience, whether that's an adventurous journey that someone's participating in for a bit of fun, or whether it's a life circumstance, or whether it's something mundane about the everyday, all experiences are worthy of a bit of reflection, which for me is the distilling process. Sitting something low and slow over a fire, letting it cook a little bit, being intentional about watching it, thinking about it, and wondering what might this become if I keep this process going.
I think that's a very full circle way back to episode 0 of us trying to explain what this is all about. Like what was just said is basically what we're using this space for, right? Gathering maple, bring it to a fire, and then slow burn. Just let it cook and bubble. Find the gold. Have the moments.
I would say episode 10 was us reflecting on the whole experience of recording 9 episodes and the things that we had still been distilling and thinking about, and we just got to reflect again on them. And this time around, things are a little bit stickier.
Need some pancakes.
Is it relevant to give practical advice?
I think that was one of Lockie's questions, yeah. So please.
If we're talking to guides or facilitators of experiences, be intentional. That's something, it's vague, but it's practical. I would say this: be genuinely curious about others. Think about what it means when you're going into a conversation with someone about actually being genuinely curious about who that other person is, what they're like, what happens in their world, and learn to identify moments. Be a listener where you wonder and you go, oh, that sounds like it's important for that person. Whatever was just said, that sounds important. Like learn to listen out for that and just practice the value of curious questions.
I have a question on one of those practices.
Yeah.
One of the practices you said was learn to identify the moments or something along those lines. Journeying with you and seeing you operate and even hearing the story of how you discovered maple, you are very good at identifying the moments. You know, you're somewhere in Canada looking at tubes coming off a tree, and you said there was something in you that was like, I have to discover more. What I'm hearing is you were identifying there was a moment going on, and that you dug and you had your own experience and you've been doing the work of reflecting that experience. Time and time again, I've seen you identify moments where I've been like, this is not a moment. But you identify that a moment is happening and just magic happens. What happens in your head or your heart or wherever it is that a flag goes up and goes, this is a moment? What happens for you? How do you identify a moment?
I think I have to trace back, and I have to paint this in light of me on a good day. If I'm not in a good or healthy space, if I'm not well, shall we say, and I need some well-being, if I'm not well, then this doesn't work very well. But if I feel well within myself, I would say that that every moment can be a moment. That's what I feel like walking through life sometimes, particularly when I'm feeling well, that every moment there's an opportunity. And there's an opportunity in everything. So I think that's the baseline. So I'm always on the lookout. So if you're not on the lookout, then like you're only going to catch the really big things, the really obvious things. And once everyone's caught the obvious things, it's pretty obvious.
Red cars.
Red cars. I mean, Jonah, you and I have been on a number of adventures where some of, I think your common language now came out of some silly moments of wondering. Yep. And we tried it out, and it's stuck in that moment, but it's translated into a whole bunch of others. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Always wondering.
I think I've heard the word potential come out of your mouth a lot in the last, I don't know, year or two, let's say. And for me, when you ask that question, Jonah, that's what comes into my head, is like walking around and looking at everything and just asking like, what is this potential? What's the potential of this? And what could this do? And it's all the same stuff. It's being curious. It's looking for potential. It's using that and just making something out of nothing. To the point now where because I'm a younger guy on social media, just scrolling and scrolling, I just see this video or a picture or a reel. It has nothing to do with me whatsoever, but you just start to twist things into making sense. And then you share that with a bunch of people, and a lot of people it makes no sense to, but then it clicks with that one person. I think you could tell this story to a lot of people and it wouldn't mean anything, but then you tell it to the right people and it clicks a lot.
Yeah, because when you see potential, what do you do with it? You nurture it. Just like the sugar maker does with the potential of his sap. Sits down and carefully nurtures it. I might finish off this analogy with one of the things that Brian told me as we finished our conversation. But I'll leave you to wonder it. I won't tell you what it meant for me, but I'll just leave it to you. So Brian told me that he was also a runner, not just a sugar maker. Loves to go for a run. And just prior to our conversation together, he told me that he'd just completed a 65-kilometre run, which for me is like a long way.
For you?
Probably for everybody in the whole world.
Everyone.
He ran a 65-kilometre run, and the sustenance that he strapped to his belt was his maple syrup. That was all he took with him. Now, to be fair, it was he said it was a mixture of his maple, a bit of water and a bit of lime. I don't know, there must be some sort of secret energy mix in there for him, I don't know. But that's what he strapped to his belt. He strapped his own maple syrup for a 65-kilometre run. And I definitely have sat in awe of that and wondered what that means on a whole bunch of levels, both physically and spiritually in my world. But I'll leave that to you.
I read a question in advance and I want to ask it at this point and see if you have an answer. If someone was listening to this episode and they felt that in their life they were pouring 40 litres of effort into something and not seeing any result, what do you feel you would tell them?
I'd have to ask that person more questions.
Mm.
I'd have to wonder with them. To try and answer your question fairly, I would encourage that person to sit down with a friend who they feel safe with and work it together. Go out for a drink, go out for a meal, go out for a walk and just talk about what's going on.
Can I full circle that going into my thoughts? We spoke about the sugar makers and how it's a thing, and they come together and they share, like, where are you getting your maple from, or what's your result, or what's this or what that. You would assume that if someone was tapping trees for maple and gathering liters and liters and not seeing a result or not getting that fine gold product that they were looking for, that you would assume there's a fault in the system. And so that, like, sitting down with someone and someone you trust and opening up that's what it is. It's one sugar maker going to another sugar maker and being like, what's your process? Or here's my process. What do you think?
Absolutely.
I've been thinking, in the world of the analogy, if I was a fellow sugar maker and a fellow sugar maker of mine was having some problem distilling, I would ask them, what's your process and how are you nurturing it? And just explore that.
Because I got a sense, and I'm in all of this, I've spoken to Brian. That's all I've done. I haven't spoken to many sugar makers. My information may be as sketchy as anything, but what the sense I got from Brian was that the community of those who sugar make is warm to each other. Like, they love to hang out, even though, you know, they're all at some level in competition making maple syrup together. They're not competing with each other. They love what they do and they want to share what they do with everybody.
I feel like there's a lot of gold. There's a lot of sticky maple and also just the more liquidy maple in the whole conversation. And that if I'm taking advantage of the moment, there is something more to be distilled post the conversation and listening back to the episode. And it is the experience in itself to be distilled. So there's no easy way to end it, but just to encourage people to distill that they just listened to. We appreciate your stories and appreciate you walking us through the journey and the experience that you've had and passing on the wisdom and the gold. Yeah, very grateful, very thankful.
It's my pleasure. I'm grateful to have been able to see behind the curtain of the Stoke podcast.
I think it's pretty special that you've obviously been a key part in the journey that Jonah and I have been on together, but also individually. And so in terms of having someone join us on this, I feel very, like, privileged in a way. I know we've brought you here and all that, but it feels like a full circle moment. And I don't know if we were to have picked from any guest in the world, I don't know if there's any other one that would make more sense to what we do. It just feels right. It makes me nervous because I feel like we can't have any other guests. I don't know what the direction is from here.
Only the beginning.
Yeah. All right. Can we wrap it up?
That's it. Wrap it up.
Boom.
Episode 11.